I'm going to try beat the Nurburgring road car lap record within 72 hours, and if I don't, I will do what the top comment says on Forza Motorsport. But why do I want to beat this lap record? Well, I've always wanted to be a racing driver competing at the very top, but seeing I don't have a billionaire dad or any actual elite skill, I guess what could be realistic is being a factory driver for an actual car manufacturer, right? So basically I'm going to try beat the time of a 629.09 held by the Project 1, and hopefully Mercedes come knocking right at my door and give me the keys to the next car. I'm totally not delusional. So here we are at the Nordschleife, and in this beautiful car, in which, if you didn't know, has the 2016 Mercedes F1 engine which won the championship. So surely with this much power I should be able to put in a really good time. As I started the first few laps of the ring, I decided to take it pretty slow as it's a completely new car for this challenge, and also a road car, which means a hell of a lot less grip, especially on road tyres. I felt like the first couple laps went okay, however there were still some mistakes in there. But apart from that, I managed to set a decent lap on only my third lap to get a 6 minute 36.659, which was only 7 seconds off the lap record, so not much time to find at all. But then another few laps later, I managed to improve by over 1 second to get a 6 minute 35.225, which was showing good progress. But I knew this early success wasn't going to last, even though I was putting more laps in. I felt like I was getting a lot worse. My inconsistency was through the roof, making mistake after mistake, spinning it on the grass, outbraking myself and just smashing into the barriers. That early confidence I did have in the car was slowly slipping away as I tried harder and harder. I was about just over an hour into the challenge, but it started to hit me how hard this was going to be. As I put more laps in and started to slowly level my car, the mistakes were unfortunately still happening, and I was nowhere near the early 2 times I put in. My quickest time after, which was about 2 hours into the challenge, was a 6 minute 35.559, but that was still an invalid lap. I also ran out of fuel a couple of times, which didn't help, but I thought, how can I get my pace and consistency back? And like in my previous challenge, what I did was actually take a step back and not try so hard. Seeing this is a road car and it has a lot of understeer, pushing harder is just going to make me slower. So I remembered this information for later in the day and decided to put my last couple laps in before I would end day 1. On lap 1 I was predicted to get around a 6 minute 31.0, but a mistake in the last couple of corners invalidated that lap, in which I still got a 6 minute 32.182, which was really motivating that I could set a lap really close to the record time with still a mistake in there. So for the next lap I focused a lot more and kept my cool and set my best valley lap so far of a 6 minute 32.589, just over 3 seconds off the record. But a lap later I was also up by 1 second, however another mistake ruined the lap and I also ran out of fuel again at the line. So this meant I wouldn't improve, and my best lap time for day 1 would be the 6 minute 32.589. I was pretty happy with the progress of day 1 and I felt like I was starting to be more consistent in the last couple of attempts, but let's hope with a little sleep I can come back much fresher and faster. It was now the second day of this challenge and I did feel a lot fresher and ready to take on the day. The first few laps didn't look so great as we did make a lot of mistakes, but I was going to give myself some leeway and a little bit of a warm up for the first 30 minutes or so. As the day went on, however, I did start to get into a bit of a groove and start some really good laps. I noticed I was being a lot more consistent with putting fast laps in, which was really good. But later in the day I would eventually put my fastest lap so far down and it was pretty close to the record time. I managed to set a 6 minute 30.981, which is just 2 seconds short off the fastest lap. I was very happy with this lap and it just made me feel like I was one step closer with getting that record time. Further into the day I noticed I was a lot more consistent with getting the low 30s, but I couldn't get anywhere near that early lap time I set. So about midway into the day I decided to take a little break and have a look at the onboard of the actual Project 1 lap time. I noticed looking at the lap, the driver was sticking very close to to the apexes and not really taking squarer lines, which I guess was probably down to the car having a lot of understeer. He also would keep the car in third gear instead of second, in which I noticed I was doing a lot and was costing me a lot of time coming out of the corners, having to go through the clutch and then change gear. So I took this information in, and after my break I started once again. I managed to set some 6-minute 32s, but still nowhere near my fastest lap time. Lap after lap went by, but I really couldn't get closer, and we eventually got to my last lap of the day. I tried to give it everything by being a bit more reserved on corner entry and taking the faster exits, but unfortunately I wouldn't beat my best lap as I set a 6-minute 31.557, which was about 6/10 off. So I decided to end day 2 and assumed it was because of fatigue later setting in. So hopefully day 3 and the final day I can find that extra 1.9 seconds. It was now the morning of day 3 and the last day of this challenge. We still have a bit of time to find, but I'm hoping with this one trick up my sleeve we can find a bit more. Luckily, as we started the day, it got off to a really good start. My first couple of laps were consistent and really fast, in which I would set the fastest lap of the challenge so far, but by not much, with a 6-minute 30.943, improving by about half a tenth. But after this lap, I knew I couldn't improve by much. That lap was almost perfect, so to find an extra 1.9 seconds is almost impossible. So to get over this pace deficit, I thought, what can I do to go faster? And what do I have? Is the setup of the car. Usually a setup can find you around half a second to a second worth of time, but seeing we're at the Nurburgring, that can be a hell of a lot more due to the length of the track. So I decided to do some work on the setup, but just because I'm not an expert on Forza, I decided to go onto YouTube for some help and came across this video from Erms. He talked about getting more rotation and how to do it, and I knew the Project 1 had a lot of understeer. So hopefully with some tweaks we can find a lot more rotation and time. I messed around with the setup for a bit, trying to see what worked and didn't, and when I came to the ride height section, it clicked in my head. The video of the Project 1's record lap had one notable thing: the car skipping and bottoming a lot across the ground, which indicated the ride height was extremely low. So I messed around with the ride height. Initially was a bit too low, but I began to find a sweet spot and decided to do more laps. With this change, the next 2 laps were incredible. My first lap, even though it didn't feel fast at all, and with a few mistakes, I managed to improve by 2/10. Then the lap after, I managed to set a 6-minute 30.151, improving by another 6/10. I was now within 1 second of the record lap. Plus that lap wasn't particularly great. The last half of it could do with a lot of improvement, so it's looking very good for the rest of the day. After that I took a little break to recuperate some energy, then eventually came back to tackle the last couple of hours of this challenge in hopes of claiming the Nurburgring lap record, and hopefully Mercedes then giving me a contract to be their factory driver. I started the next few laps and thankfully once again I felt good in the car. I managed to set a couple laps close to the 6-minute 30s, then shortly after set my fastest lap so far of a 6-minute 29.949, just 8/10 off the lap record. However, after this I fell into a bad spiral. I was being too conservative and not really pushing the car. I was so nervous because there was so little time left in the day and I was in my last hour, but eventually a potential lap came in. The first few corners were one of my best so far, and I just sent it into every corner I could. The mid part of the lap was okay, but not my best. Wide into a few corners and I felt like I lost a few temps. I managed to get through the carousels and the last sector of the track filled with high speed corners, but as we got to the Dottinger Straight, I was just thinking. I had all the time in the world and I knew I needed to nail these last few corners. But I did it. I improved on my last time by over 1 second. I just gave it everything into every corner and hoped the car stuck, and it did. In the end, I managed to beat the Nordschleife lap record by just over 4/10 of a second to get a 6-minute 28.676. My god, this was the hardest challenge I think I've ever done.